In this video tutorial, I'm going to look at different interactions with an Unreal. I'm going to use the door as an example, basically. So we're going to do an opening and closing of a door. So I've got a few versions here. If I click on play, this first door isn't going to do anything right now. It's not got any interaction, or it's got the interaction switched off. A second door is really simple one that we just go into a hit area and the door opens and can come out of the hit area and it closes. Now third one here, we can press E and we can interact with this door by doing that. This is a different one based on a different version. So these last two doors, just escape out of this door and this door, are kind of based on the same sort of script, but this one uses a different method that we'll look into in a little bit. So let's just have a look at this first one first. With this one, essentially what I've done is I've made a door and I've allowed, so say you had this door in your scene and you wanted different variations on it. So I wanted one door to be open, one door closed, one door slightly open. So what I've done here is I've created a public variable on this, which allows us to open this door at different states. So rather than have it just fixed, we have a variable on this that allows us to open and close this. This is more of as a static prop, not interactive, but allows us to kind of create different variations on our door. So for example, I could have one open. I'm just going to alt drag this. Let's just drag this to one side for a second. I could have another version of this partially closed. Alt drag this. I could have another version of this completely closed, etc., etc. So it just allows us a bit of freedom rather than making individual different objects. We can just create one and we can have these different states. So let's look at that one first. Okay. Oops. Leave that one on. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to just create a new folder. I'm going to call this something like interaction. Go in here. I'm going to right click. And I'm going to go to blueprints and we're going to create a blueprint class. So this is going to allow us first of all to put several different elements together and then create some functionality within this as well. So what I've got, let me just create this. So I'm going to create a actor. I'm going to call this BC for blueprint class underscore, and let's call this tutorial door. 01. So if I open this, this is going to be completely empty. Let me just drag this down. It's going to be completely empty. We need to bring some elements into here. So I'm going to go in to my static meshes, and I've got a door and a door frame as separate things. So this is my door. What I'll just do is let's just make a basic material for this. I have made a material that works on this, but I'm just going to create a really basic material just to go on this. So let's just go in, let's create a material. To here, and let's set some very simple properties. So let's go in, and I'm not going to set any. Yeah, okay, I'll do a 3 constant here. So pressing 3 down and holding left mouse button to create a 3 constant. So I can add a color into this. Pressing 1 down to add a 1 constant. So 1 and left click, add another 1 constant. I'm going to plug this into base color, and this into metallic, and this into roughness. And then let's add some values to this. So I'm just going to set this to white. I'm going to leave my metallic at 0, and I'll set my roughness at about 0.7, 0.6. Don't want it too shiny. Let's just apply and save that. Okay. And then what I can do is I can go into my door. And I'm just going to put this basic material on here. So if we go in, set the basic material. I'll just leave it at that for now. Okay. Let's just save that. I'm going to do the same with my door frame. So again, let's just double click on that. Let's add this basic door material and just save that. Nothing important. As I say, I've got an actual material for that, but just so we've got something. Just to differentiate from these as well. So into my blueprint class, we've got this BC tucked door. What I'm going to do is we can add component, and I can add a static mesh. Do it that way. So currently I have this static mesh SM door frame because I've got that selected. What I can also do is drag and drop these in. So let's grab this, let's shift click on this. Let's drag it up into my door and just drag those both in. So this is in here now. Not quite in the right place. So I've just got my snapping set to 1. Gonna move this in. Oops, my door frame. Let me grab the door and just grab that, move it a little bit. Press F on that. I'm just gonna move that back a little bit as well. Like that. And then just so that fits in place. And then just check in terms of this rotation. So I have that rotation working. If I just click off my angle snap, I have that working. Okay. So initially I could just create this as a door, just to bring this in as an object rather than grouping it. And we could bring that into the scene. And we could just have a door, different variations of being open or closed. I will just go up and just set this rotation back to 0. Just so we have our door in there, and let's just compile and save this. So it's most basic. That's our door. Okay. So let me go in. Let's just go to this interaction folder. Let's bring this blueprint class in there. We have our very simple door. Right now, obviously, that's not doing anything. So let's start adding some interaction to this. Let me just move these around a little bit. There we go. So let's look at adding our first bit of interaction. So back to my blueprint class. I'm going to do this on the construction script. What that allows us to do is kind of set some values initially so that when we add it in there into our scene, we can change those properties, or we can set the properties and it'll just be like that from the start. So it's kind of the default properties of our door essentially in this. So we get this construction script, which just means that when this is in the scene, this is going to be triggered. So that's what kind of event it is. So there's a couple of things I need within this. The first thing I'm going to do is add a set relative rotation. So let's just right click. Let's start typing in set relative rotation. And we've actually got this on the door here, which is the thing that we want to change. I can also do this by dragging this door in, dragging an instance of this door in, and then dragging from this and saying set, oops, take caps lock off, set relative rotation there. Okay, so we can do it in 2 different ways. So essentially we want this to be triggered off onto this rotation. So let's plug this into here so that when we put that in the scene, we can change that value. And that's triggering off this SM door, which is just a static mesh. So now we want the door amount. So we have to set this as a variable because this is obviously going to change. So by the very nature of a variable, it's going to have a value that changes. So over here, in our details or our components, we have this variable, and I can go in and we can add a new variable. So I'm going to click on that, click on the plus. We're going to go in and rename this to open close amount, something like that. No spaces in these names. I need to change this to type, and I'm going to change it to We can change this to a float or an integer. The difference being that floating point has a decimal point, an integer is a whole number. So depending what you want to work with. Let's do it to a float. Okay, I'm going to just compile and save this. And what that allows me to do is set a default value. If you want to set that to be open straight away or closed straight away, we need to compile that before that value comes down. I'll leave it closed right now. So value of 0, it means it's closed. Value of whatever we set it to, it's going to be open. And I'm going to set some limitations to this as well. So 0, so I can't push it the wrong way, to something like 180, which allows it to open all the way. Okay. Again, let's compile and save that. So I can drag this variable in now, and it gives us two options. We can get that value or we can set that value. What I want to do is I want to get that value because we're going to plug that into this rotation. So I'm going to get that there. So the main issue with this is here I have 3 values and here I have 1 value that we're taking in. So there's a couple of ways to do this. I'm going to do it the easiest way. Basically, I'm going to right click over this pin, this input pin, and what we can do is we can split that pin. So now we have these 3 values as separate values. So let's just check the rotation that we're going to do this on. So I click on my door. If I just rotate that the way we're going to rotate it, it's actually working on the value now, but it's going to be, in fact, let me just, where a construction script. It's because it's asking for value. Let's just unplug that for a second. Just to look at this. There we go. Again, I'll just take the angle snap off quickly. So I can see that that's rotating on the Z axis. Okay, so let's just reset that. So that's the one that we want to plug into. So again, in my construction script, let's plug these back in. So my SM door into my target. Let's plug this into here. And let's plug this into my Z yaw there. Compile, and let's save that. So if I was to look at this in the scene, I can't actually change that value right now. And the reason for that is that we've not made it public. So basically I can only see it in this area here. So I could go in and physically change this variable. So let's go in here. I could go in and change this value here. Let's compile and save. Let's click on that and you can see it's open. But we want to do that on the fly as we're bringing our door into our level. So to do that, let's just set this back to its default, 0. And what we do is on this variable, we just click on this public. So clicking that little eye on makes that available publicly, which means, let's compile and save again, that now what we have on this is this value here, this open close amount. So now what I can do is I can open and close that on the fly, okay, between those different versions. So that's really, as I said, there's no interaction on there apart from a kind of straightforward interaction of just opening and closing the door. But that wouldn't allow the player to interface with that at all. That just allows us as a level designer really to change that property. But it is a useful thing to be able to do, to have multiple versions of the same object but with different properties on that. So you could have a trunk with lid, various states of the lid open, windows, various states of the window open, a light, various states of intensity. You can do lots with that. So that's kind of the first stage. Okay. So let's look at the next one. Let's look at being able to create something simple like this one, which allows us to actually have some interaction with the door instead. So I'm going to carry on from this blueprint class we've already got. Let's go into the event graph now. And this is where we can start playing around with different events. So it gives us 3 events by default: event begin play, event actor begin overlap, and event tick. I'm just going to get rid of these. We're not going to use these at all. I'm going to create our own. So first things first, what I want to do is create a Boolean variable. So essentially I want to keep this in place to allow us to open and close that door. But If I want the player to interact with that, I don't want this value on there at all. So what we need to do is create a boolean to have like a state on that of true or false, that we can interact with the door or we can't interact with the door. So I'm going to create another variable. This time I'm going to create a boolean variable. Let's call this interact state. By default, let's again just compile and save this to give our default value. By default, I want this to be interactive. I want that to be able to be interacted with. And again, I'm going to make this a public variable as well. So we compile and save. So again on that, now we have this interact state and this open and close amount. Both of those on there. So go into this. Go into our event graph now. And we need to create one more thing. In fact, I'm going to go back to the viewport. So the most simple way of interacting with something is a hitbox or a hit area. So we can go in and add component on here. And if I just scroll down to our collisions, I'm just going to use a simple box collision on this. So I'm just going to move this to where we're going to have the player interact with it. Let's just make this a bit bigger. So make sure that the player can hit that area. You don't want this too big because you'll start opening the door when you're nowhere near it. Now I'm just considering the way that the door opens. If this was a sliding door, you wouldn't need to make this as big. And again, you've got to be careful with how big you do make this. But let's say something like that. Allows the door to open. And what I'll do is I'll give this a name. So let's right click. Let's rename this. Let's call this hit area. And that's going to be our interaction on there. So basically when we go into that, the door's going to open. When we come out of it, the door's going to close. Okay. So let's go to our event graph. And that's the first thing I'm going to do is create the event for this hit area. So we can just right click over this hit area, add event, and there's all the events that will work with this. I'm going to use this on component begin overlap. Add that in. I'm also going to add in, because I want to change it so that when I come out of that area, the door's going to close. I'm going to add that in as well straight away. So we've got end overlap. So one will open the door, one will close the door. Let's bring those down. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check that we can interact with this door. So what we can do is we've got our interact state. I can drag a version of that in and let's get that. So we're going to check what that is. Okay. And then with this one, I'm going to do what's called a branch, which is an if statement essentially. So if this is true, it will allow it to do something. If not, it won't. So I'm going to drag out from here. I'm going to start typing in branch. So there we go. We've got if the condition is true, come out with that. Or we can check if the condition is false as well. So I'm going to drag that, or if it matches a condition. So I'm going to drag that up so that actually then we're checking on this one. So in this case, it's saying if this is true, this is our default state, then we're going to come out of here and we're going to do something. If it's false, then it's not going to actually do that. Okay. So let's go in. And let's create a way of opening this door. So a useful way of doing this in Unreal is with something called a timeline. And we can use this for all sorts of things. So I could use it for having a sliding door. I could have it for if I wanted to lift a platform into the air. Lots of different things. So basically it creates an animation for us that we can just trigger off. So let's drag out from this true and let's add timeline. I'm going to call this timeline door open close. Okay. And then I'm going to double click on this. And then we have, we can actually set our value here. So I'm going to use a float value. I only want to create one value here. which is just the amount that the door is going to open and close. So a float value is going to be the one I would use. If I had something moving on 2 or 3 axes, I'd use a vector instead, which will give me access to the X, Y, and Z. But I don't want the door moving all over the place. So let's click on this Add Float Track. I'm going to give this a name here. So let's right click and rename. And let's call this open close amount. And then we can shift click on this timeline to add variables in there or values in there. This is actually keyframes. So we've got a length of 5. I'm going to bring this down. Let's have it maybe 3 seconds. And just zoom out of this. And then I'm going to shift click at the end here to put our other keyframe. And then what I can do is start adding values onto this. So I'll just move this back so we have our time. I'm going to move that to 0. This one, I'll have at 3. So this one wants to be a value of 0. This one I want to be a value of however much we want it to open. So let's try something like 160 on this. And then if I press F again, we can actually see that working. We actually see our animation curve on that. So I'm going to do this so it creates a bit of spacing on this. I don't want this to move at a linear. I want it to start really quick as if the door was pushed and then slow down at the end. So if I grab this keyframe, right click over it and do a user, and I can just grab this handle and just bring that up. So this moves really quickly and then it slows down at the end. Okay. So we can compile and save that again. And we can come out of this. So I'll just close that down. We've got our animation. So like we did with the construction script, I'm going to use this set relative rotation again. So actually I can grab this and Control C it to copy it. And we can just paste this in Control V while recreating that. So let's click on this. So basically what we're saying is when this timeline is updating, meaning when it's animating, this is plugging this into the set relative rotation. Okay. The open and close amount, we've got the same thing as our construction script. We want to plug into the Z, the yaw. So I can take, my event graph. This is that amount we created, the animation channel we did. So open close amount, I can drag that and put that in. And then the target, if I compile this, we're going to get an error. So this doesn't know what it's linking to. So I need to tell it to link to this door again. So if I drag the door out, let's pull this up. And you see all of these are color coded as well. So blue goes to blue, green goes to green, etc. So that's now saying open the door. So we compile, we save, do that. So with this one, I'm going to grab this as well. Let's Control C, Control V. Let's drag this out. So begin area overlap, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring that into the branch. And this time, I'm going to say if it's true again, I'm going to do this reverse. So there's two things on this. There's reverse and reverse from end. Let's do reverse from end first, and I'll show you what that does and why I would use the other one. So compile, save. So let's look at this now. So we've got our hit area. So if we go into that area, it's going to check that it can interact with this object. If it can, so based on this variable, if it can, then it's going to go through. It's going to play the animation. And as it's playing the animation, it's going to take the value that we have from this animation channel, and it's going to plug that into the rotation of this door. Okay. When we leave this, again, it's checking that that is true, the actual interaction state, and then it's plugging this in. So it's just taking this animation and reversing it. So let's go in, press play on this. There we go. So go into it, come out. Okay, so the reverse from end, if I go into this and then go out of it really quickly, you see what that does. So it just jumps to the end of the animation, then comes straight back. So we don't really want that. So instead of plugging into that, I'm going to plug into this reverse. Compile, let's save. Go into this. And now if I go into that, come out, it will take it from wherever it's open to. Okay. So quite nice for kind of sci-fi sliding doors to have that sort of interaction. It's absolutely fine to do that kind of thing. If you just want a door to open when you walk up to it. Wouldn't really work with one of these kind of doors, but just an example of interaction. Just to show you, if I bring this out, if I switch this interact state off, there, make that false. So now that's not working, okay? So if I wanted the door to be purely as a static thing and just be able to open it a little bit, but I don't really want the player to actually interact with it, we can do that. You can just click that interact state off. And then we've got that. And it just means I don't have to make another version of this door. So I've got my interactive one there. And then I've just got this static one here. Okay. So I'll leave this video tutorial for there. This is kind of part 1. In part 2, we'll look at actually being able to use a key-based interaction. So have it so that when we go to a door and press something like E, we can open and close that door. So we'll look at that next.